My name's Emiliano Diaz de Leon. I am the Men's Engagement Specialist with the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. And I'm thrilled to have with me this afternoon um, a new friend and colleague from Houston, Texas, Hermie. How do you pronounce your last name?
Escamilla.
All right. And I just want to make sure I get that right because I get a lot of people that don't do justice to my last name, so I want to make sure to get your last name correct. So welcome to this TAASA Google Hangout with Hermie. Who is with the Houston Hollaback, and it really is an opportunity during Sexual Assault Awareness Month to focus on talking specifically about sexual harassment, especially street harassment, and the role that men can play in ending and preventing sexual harassment, whether it's in the workplace, at school, in their place of worship, but especially on the streets. So Hermie was gracious to join me today to talk a little bit about what men can do to support women and challenge men when they're engaging in that kind of behavior, as well as to support women's efforts in ending street harassment. And so this is a Google Plus Hangout for the Mobilizing Men Task Force, which was a network of individuals and organizations around the state of Texas who are engaged in violence prevention work and around the issue of sexual violence. So it's only appropriate that we have this conversation today and share it this month during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, as well as the International Anti-Street Harassment Week. And so we're really grateful for you, Hermie, to be with us, to be with me this afternoon, and I look forward to engaging in this conversation with you.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Hollaback Houston and how you got involved with the organization, and just anything you want to share about yourself.
Sure. Well, I officially launched the organization Hollaback Houston, and I apologize to everyone that's listening that my voice is not its best right now, so just a disclaimer beforehand. I'm getting over a sickness, but I launched the local chapter of this global movement that started in New York City in 2005 with a group of people who realized that there wasn't anyone directly addressing street harassment. In the workplace, there's avenues for people to report sexual harassment, whether it's coworkers or customers, within clients, within the organization. But in public spaces, there's really not a means for people to find any type of justice or support in that way. And so that's why they decided, okay, well, let's create an organization around this. And they were inspired by this woman named Thao Nguyen, who was on a subway train, and there was a man in front of her who was masturbating on the train. It was just the two of them there. And, this was very frightening for her, as it would be for anybody. And so what could she do at the time? She took a photo of him with her cell phone. And so when she got off the train, she went to some policemen that were nearby and told them about the situation, and they basically told her that there was nothing they could do. And so with that, she was on her own, but she decided that she was going to let the public know that this happened to her. And so she posted the video on her Flickr account, and turns out that people knew who he was. I mean, he was a very well-known restaurateur. He had several raw food restaurants in the New York City area, and so that got people talking about, street harassment and, the different ways people encounter that, because there's this misconception that it's just, verbal catcalls is what most people are familiar with, and so there's a spectrum of gender-based violence that a person can encounter in a public space. And so with that, the the individuals who started Hollaback saw how quickly, her situation went viral and got attention of media, news media, national broadcasts. And so they decided to, continue on with that sort of format of allowing the public to tell their stories and feel validated that it is wrong for someone to just feel like that's something that you put up with. And so with that, they started, the New York organization, and then they started getting requests from people to help them in their own communities. And so that's how they started, allowing people to have a local chapter. And so with that, they allow people to go through, their training, which is all provided for free. It's phenomenal. You just have to be dedicated to the work. And so as of this year, there's active chapters in 71 cities, 24 countries across the globe, and in 14 different languages. So that kind of shows, how widespread this problem is, and how we all really have to work together as a global community to help address it. Because, while the movement is going to be different, geographically, we're all trying to help amplify each other's voices, so that way we can, continue, creating this conversation in different communities as it's relevant to each of us, and also broaden the picture for the greater public to understand how it's sort of a gateway into, more aggressive violence, how this is just sort of, just one step in that process. And I got involved because I saw that there wasn't an active chapter in Houston at the time, and so this was last year, and so I was able to get in contact with the directors that are in New York, and so they got me on the schedule to be part of the next class, they call it, of new sites that we're going to launch in December. And so, like I said, I officially launched in mid-December of last year. And so it's been fantastic to, partner with different organizations, TAASA, the latest collaboration, and so it's phenomenal having, guidance from other organizations that are, working on similar topics and working with the public, that I can also refer people to as well, and spread that information, because if people aren't talking about this, they also don't know how to get help and support. And so so I just want to make as many organizations visible as possible, in whatever way I can.
And that's one of the reasons that I've been looking forward to this particular conversation with you, because just really inspired by your commitment to this particular this project in Houston. And I think there's so much opportunity there to explore this issue, not just in Houston but throughout the state of Texas. I think my hope is that folks will see this Google Hangout and will inspire them to organize their own chapters in their own communities, and so and really think about what is the role of men within those chapters, and how can we encourage men to not just get involved with a project like yours, but to also to stand with women around this particular issue. So so I think you answered it somewhat in terms of about sharing a lot about Hollaback and their history and how you organized Hollaback Houston. But I'm curious, is there something that brought you to this work? Is it why anti street harassment work for yourself? Like, what is it? What is it that that inspired you to become involved with this project?
Um, as I tell people, I really wasn't looking to um, be director of a local organization. It was really something that kind of fell in my lap as a project to take on because nobody was doing it for Houston, and currently I am the only Hollaback chapter in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do need some help. So I would love it if I could collaborate with other cities across the state. And I guess for me personally, I've been a cyclist for the last 8 years, just solely a cyclist as my means of transportation. And in a state like Texas, where it's kind of a joke, I tell people that it's always truck month. I mean, there's just that sort of disparity in the population where so many people are driving, and I pulled some statistics of some census data, the most recent from 2011, and so to just kind of compare what's going on here in Texas compared to the East Coast as far as public transportation is involved. In Harris County, Houston, which is central Houston, 80% of people commute by personal vehicle compared to 6.6% of people in Manhattan.
Wow.
And so that kind of shows you, how much more, people on the East Coast are in public spaces, and that's why those chapters, are much more active, and there's a lot more of them because it's happening to people more frequently there, as opposed to here, where 2.9% of people are using public transportation. And what does that say about the availability of the resources, and what does that say about the voice that these people have? 2.9% compared to 59% in New York.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot more people that are very vocal about their experience with public transportation on that side of the country than here in Texas. And so I think, that's something that we really need to look at as a state of, what type of safety we're providing for the minority of people that, are using public transit as, part of their commute. I mean, these people may also be walking quite a ways to get to a bus stop. I mean, near where I live, I just saw a bus stop removed. So, so whoever used to use that bus stop, even if it was just one person, they're having to walk further now to the next bus stop to, catch their regular route. And so if more people are, using their personal vehicles, and there's not enough people having these conversations around street harassment. And so that's why groups like Hollaback are so important, to, be out in the public and find ways to reach people that maybe wouldn't normally talk about it. And because this is something that's happening pretty immediately. Like, it's happening right now. People are being harassed in different parts of the city, different parts of the state. And so it's a community effort for us to address it, because we can't always wait for law enforcement to intervene and interrupt the behavior. We really need, people in the community to help each other out, in an immediate way. And if that is, being at a bus stop and you see somebody getting harassed for any number of reasons, it doesn't have to just be, male-female interaction. It can be someone that is shouting, racist comments at somebody, or attacking someone's religious presence, just physical aspects of a person that someone can be harassed about. If you're there, and you feel safe to do so, we call that being a better bystander.
Yeah.
So you can, maybe interrupt that interaction, or just show that person who's being harassed that you're there to support them, check in with them, see if they're okay. And so yeah, like I said, as me personally, as a cyclist, riding my bike everywhere, yeah, like one, it's scary, you know, riding alongside cars that aren't familiar with, you know, my rights to the roads.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you know, being on the receiving end of aggressive behavior because they think I'm going too slow, or I'm in the way, or I need to be on the sidewalk. And then, you know, being a woman and then having men feel like they have the power to harass me and then speed off in their car is really scary, you know, because I am by myself and I am vulnerable in that way, that I'm not protected by a ton of steel. You know, I've just got me and my bike, you know, and so, you know, and I'm not the only one that experiences this, you know, and so I think that with our dominant car culture, that that drivers do need to understand that there are people that are going through this, and that it's people they care about. It's their friends, it's their coworkers, as a person that they see every day when they go buy coffee, you know. So it's about personalizing the situation and really holding each other accountable for the way we interact.
That's so true. Thank you so much for sharing that, especially your own experience. And there's so many women and men who have witnessed this type of kind of harassment in public, on the street, at school, you know, the place of worship. So there's so many, like you said, you know, it's not just something that's happening on the street around, that's a form of sexual violence, but is also around, you know, race and gender identity and physical abilities. There's a lot of types of violence and harassment that can occur in those kinds of settings. And I really appreciate what you said, because I think there's an opportunity for all of us, regardless of our experiences, to intervene in some way. And I think that's why this conversation is so important, is to really hopefully encourage guys to really think about what it is that they can do to intervene when they witness when their buddies engaging in that kind of behavior, whether it's in a car, on the street, like you said. I think I really hope that men will really think about you know, doing something and holding and calling other men out when they're engaged in that kind of behavior. And I know that you know, unfortunately, the reality is that my mother, my sister, my wife have experienced these forms of sexual harassment on the street or in the workplace, and you know, men don't say or do anything. And so I think that's why this conversation is so critical. Somebody reminded me that this conversation is necessary not just during this week, during anti-street harassment you know, week. I think it's so important that we engage in these conversations on an ongoing basis. But I appreciate the points that you made. So I think one of the things we talked about is this being a back and forth conversation, and so I know that you have some really specific questions for me as well.
Yeah. So I wanted to get your perspective, just being around men in your social circles, why you think that when men hear this topic or they're called out on it, why they may not be taking it as seriously as they should.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I really appreciate that question. I appreciate being asked myself. I think, you know, posing that question made me think about why haven't we as an organization or as a task force really addressed this particular issue. And I think, you know, I think this is a place where you know, men are uncomfortable engaging in these conversations and really acknowledging their own role in committing acts of sexual harassment. And so I think it's a difficult conversation for men to have with each other. That's not an excuse that we shouldn't be having this conversation, because I think this is what the international anti-street harassment efforts that are happening this week around the world are really forcing men to really calling men out on their behavior. And I think that's really key, is that if that unfortunately for a long time, women have been calling men out on this behavior, hauling back at men on the street who have been harassing them or physically assaulting them. And so, I think this is an opportunity for us as men to engage in this conversation with each other, to really hear women's voices and stories and understand the impact of our behavior on women's lives and their safety, their sense of safety. I mean, you acknowledged that earlier in terms of feeling safe on the street, riding your bike, and feeling safe. And I think that's really important for us as men to hear. And I really hope that by hearing those stories, by hearing the stories of the girls and women in our lives, by hearing the stories of the women that we work with, that we go to school with, that we worship with, around this particular issue will really have an impact on our behavior, as well as, get guys to begin to have this conversation with each other. This is a conversation that unfortunately, I'm going to have with my son, and who's 4 years old right now. But when we are on the street, when we're at the park, when we're in the car, unfortunately he's witnessing men engage in this type of behavior. And so, it's about respect, right? Treating people with respect and dignity, and ensuring that everyone, especially women, feel safe anywhere in our communities, right? And so I think it should be a conversation that we're having with each other, and that we should reflect and acknowledge our own behavior and hold other men accountable. I think that's really the key. Is like, especially when that man that is closest to us is engaging in that kind of behavior, we have to be willing. We have to hold that guy accountable, and talk to him about the impact of his behavior on women and their safety. And you're absolutely right. These types of incidents tend to escalate to acts of physical and sexual violence. And so I think for us here at TAASA, this conversation is a way for us to prevent sexual violence from occurring, from rape to from rape to occur. We really think that this is an important part of our primary prevention work, and that's why it's so important that we have this conversation, not just this week, but throughout the year.
Right. And I guess along that topic of escalating to violence, when a woman or just anyone responds back to harassment, what we want is for that person to just say, "I'm sorry." That would be so ideal if, someone said something disrespectful and we could say, "I don't like that," or "Don't touch me," or "Don't call me that." That the person wouldn't then flip the switch and then become vulgar, and and now all of a sudden, instead of you being a desirable object, now you're ugly anyway, or maybe they want to attack you physically. We really just want people to feel like confronting it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're a bad person. You just need to know that you messed up.
Absolutely.
And, you don't have to take it to another level and then, retaliate against this person that just asks you to treat them with respect. And so I guess maybe some suggestions from you, or things that maybe you suggest to other men, in the form of thinking about ways to practice nonviolence, if there's particular figures, that you look to or that you refer people to, whether they're male or female? Do you have some suggestions for people to, kind of reference some type of strength and wisdom, and maybe rethinking the way a harasser would react to someone that says something back to them?
Yeah. So I appreciate that, because I think one of the things that we have to acknowledge, that the onus on this behavior is absolutely on the harasser, not the victim. And I think that's really, I think it's really important to acknowledge in this conversation that the person that is responsible for this form of violence, right, is men who are engaged in this kind of behavior. And so I think it is taking a hard look at ourselves, right, and really listening to women and respecting them, and I think that's, we've been told as a culture, we've been conditioned to believe that we have, that women are therefore to be objectified. And so part of rape culture kind of explicitly states that we should have access to women and their bodies, and it's okay for us to say whatever we want to women, and so unfortunately this is a really common experience of a lot of women, but it's also a common experience, like you said, for men, whether it's them witnessing this kind of behavior or actually engaging in the behavior. And I think for me, I think it's really important that we reflect on when we're called out, when we're Hollabacked at, to really reflect on our behavior, and to really understand the experiences of that women, of women in our community, and to really understand the impact that has, not just on that particular woman, but all of our women, all the women in our girls in our community as well. And so it requires an honest conversation with ourselves, and I think from experience it's difficult. One of the things that was really profound for me in doing that hard work, right, and asking and really addressing my own sexism, is Men's Work by Paul Kivel. I think really that is one of those books that really shifted my understanding around these issues, and really compelled me to do the work. The Macho Paradox by Jackson Katz, Breaking Out of the Man Box by Tony Porter, From a Call to Men. So there's a number. I think those are just some books that really have helped me begin to explore some of the underlying roots and causes of my own attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors towards women, as well as towards other men. My unwillingness to engage and to call men out or to hold them accountable. I don't think I necessarily had those examples in my life coming up. I never saw guys on the street or at home or at my school call guys out for engaging in that kind of behavior. So I don't think that we necessarily have had a lot of really, we have to be that role model for other men. We have to, my son needs to see me exploring these issues and taking an active role in preventing sexual violence from happening. And so, and that's an important role, not just as a father, but as a man with. And I understand that it's not just important for me to engage the men in my life, but to engage those guys on the street, which takes a tremendous amount of courage. And to and there's also a fear, right? Men are concerned that those when we try to call men out on the street, especially men who we don't know, that's going to escalate into physical violence, and that's exactly we don't want that to occur. And so I think, it's safer when we can do that with other guys, when we can engage men with other men who are supportive of us and who are standing with us, and when men can stand with women who are experiencing that type of violence and abuse. I think that's key, right? And there's still a lot of work to do because the majority of men are not engaged in that kind of activity. They're not what you just laid out. The majority of guys here in Texas are not who are not intervening or taking a stand or talking to their buddy about their behavior. So there's still a lot of work for us to do, and I think it begins with conversations, with listening to women, to acknowledging women's experiences. One of the books that was really profound for me that really helped me understand the profound impact of violence and oppression on women's lives is The Color of Violence. It is a book that I have to read and read and read back over and over and over from Insight, and it's a profound book for men, especially for men of color to understand the experiences of women of color around these issues, and I think it's an important book to read, and there's so many others, and I want to encourage folks to if they're looking to explore these issues, and they don't have to explore these things by themselves, to reach out to me, and I have a list. I have a list of resources for guys to begin to explore this issue, to begin undoing some of the damage that we're doing to girls and women in our community. So there's a lot of things we can do. So thank you for that question, Hermie.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you like men to respond to other men who are I think you've touched on this already, but how would you like men to respond to other men who are sexually harassing women on the street or school, workplace? What would you like to see from guys in these situations?
I think, just as much as for the women, it's important to take your safety into account in the situation because, in a split second, anything could escalate. So it would be important for men as bystanders to call out the behavior, not be vulgar with that person, or call them names, or use profanity, because then that just puts you on their level, and all you want to do is just address it. That's disrespectful. It's maybe a little bit easier when you're in a friend group, but hard at the same time because you don't want to create any bad blood with your friends. That's really hard. Really, really hard. You may have less friends at the end of the day, but we would like to think that, people who we do call our true friends respect our opinions. And so that would be certainly a great way to find that out, is someone else's reaction to, your disapproval of behavior, because it's not that you think that they're a bad person. They just made a poor judgment in letting someone walk away feeling hurt or, depressed, or that they don't belong in a particular space. And that's not right. Nobody owns the streets. We all should have access to all the same spaces without fear. And that's what harassment creates. We change our routes because we know, oh man, like every time I walk down this way or every time I ride over here, there's always this guy there's always this person, or there's construction going on, and I know that those guys are going to say something to me, you know. So that changes our behavior. So, you know, we need to have men say something like, "Man, what if that was your sister? You know, you don't want somebody to talk to her like that," or, you know, that's somebody's mom. You know, I mean, women walking with their children will get harassed, you know, and so what does that show, you know, those children that are with her? You know, what kind of, you know, feelings are they, you know, creating within themselves about the way men and women interact? And so we need to stop normalizing this behavior by, you know, having that leadership within ourselves to point out, you know, why that's wrong. And the bottom line is it's disrespect. That's disrespectful. And so, yeah, so to the other harassers, that's what you point out, that, you know, I shouldn't talk to people like that, or, you know, that she's clearly upset. You shouldn't talk to her like that, or, hey, stop talking to her, stop touching her. And so, and then if that person is walking away and, you know, maybe it wasn't safe to say something, you know, you could catch up with that person, or, you know, if you're on the bus with them, you know, find out, do you know this person? You know, because then maybe that's a little different. If it, you know, it's someone that they know, then, you know, you may have 2 against 1 now if all of a sudden they both turn on you. But, you know, simple questions like that. Do you know this person? Or are you okay? You know, or going up to the bus driver and letting that bus driver know, hey, keep an eye out for this person because they're harassing so-and-so, or they're being vulgar, or they're just being generally inappropriate. And because that causes a safety concern for the driver, you know. And so I'm sure they would be really glad to know what's going on behind them, you know, because while they're trying to make sure everyone gets to their destination safely, they need to not worry about, you know, people being inappropriate behind them. And so, yeah, so those are the ways of, you know, checking in with a person that's been harassed, addressing the behavior of the person who's doing the harassing, and then ask for help from other bystanders, whether it's other passengers, other people that are pedestrians, or, like I said, the bus driver.
Yeah, I couldn't have given any better advice, and I think that's, you know, I think that's key, Hermie. I appreciate that because I think that's just really insightful. And again, we don't think about this issue in Texas for the reasons you talked about earlier. You know, we don't, you know, men don't have to think about their safety when they leave their house, or you know, they're going out to their car. I don't have to worry about that. In the same way that women do, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that that's wrong. It's unacceptable that that women have to change their route, like you said earlier, when it's clearly men should be changing their behavior, and I think that's really key. Is that men need to change their behavior, and you absolutely just, you know, said it so well in terms of it's the norm. This kind of behavior has become the norm in our society. Even the Snickers commercial that came out, I don't know if you've
Oh, yes.
read or seen that, right?
Right.
That kind of behavior is now used to sell a particular product, right? And whether those men are engaging in this, like what we want men to say to women, right? There's still an example of men harassing women on the street. And you know, and that's an important, you know, it's generated a lot of discussion both online and in social media, and I think it's important that men are part of that conversation, and I've been happy to see that men are writing and responding to that particular ad, and sharing their own experiences around this issue, and that but it's there's so many more guys that need to be having this conversation that we're having today, with the girls and women in their lives, and And I think that, at least for me, is really key, right? It's not just to have this conversation with you, but to really engage in this conversation with my coworkers and with my partner and you know, all the women in my life, my mother and my sister. I know, unfortunately, that they've experienced these types of things, and that's just wrong. So there's a lot of work for us to do, but I appreciate that. So I think what's really important for me as we're having this conversation is how I, as a man, and we as an organization, as the Sexual Assault Coalition here in Texas, can support you. But more importantly, how can men in Houston and around the state support you in the work that you're doing? I think it's really important for us to hear how, clearly I think you want men to be a part of the work that you're doing in Houston and to be a part of this particular chapter. But how can folks support you in the work that you're doing?
What men can do to support the work is really just to listen. Because there's a lot of misconceptions about street harassment, what it is, what it looks like, what it feels like to experience it. And if you've decided that you already have all the answers and you haven't even picked up a book on the subject, or you haven't asked someone about their experiences, then you've stopped a conversation from even happening. And so there has to be a type of willingness in, not just men, but the general public to really consider how this affects people, how this is sort of a pipeline into, more aggressive behavior. And that comes from being willing to read about it, hear about it, and then, once you have more information on the subject from different sides, people, read lots about politics and, creating their decision on who they're going to vote for. And so when we try to figure out ways we can move forward and collaborate with one another, we need to have a lot more information than, well, I just have this opinion and that's what I'm going to go with. That's not an appropriate way to move forward. We really need to be willing to be more objective about the situation and collect information from, three sides of the argument, and because it's not all about being right, it's just about, providing support, for people that really need it the most. And that's the biggest part of what Hollaback is providing support. And then secondly, education for people that experience harassment and people that are perpetrators of harassment. And so and so we can do a lot of talking to people that are on the same page, but we really need a broader audience to really reconsider their role, because we all have a role in it, because as I said before, it's happening all the time. It's happening today. On my way to my event on Sunday, I was harassed 3 times on the way there. So, it's just something that, we can affect right now, something that we don't have to wait for, the policymakers to do something about. We really have that much power to, help make someone, not go home feeling completely depressed, because we don't know what their story is, the way someone receives the harassment, the way that it affects them, can vary from person to person. Some of us can laugh it off, let it roll off. Some people, have been attacked or raped before, and that's, a newly triggering experience for them, to where they feel like, I shouldn't have been outside, I shouldn't have been out by myself, or just keeps people from engaging in normal activities of being in public, especially in the LGBT communities where they feel like they're not welcome because they get harassed, and so they don't engage in public activities, the way heterosexual people can freely do. Um, and so that's why we need to be willing to look outside of our own situations and consider other people's experiences as valid and varying, and to look also beyond our country, as this is an international movement. I mean, Hollaback is not the only organization addressing street harassment. Like recently we've been talking about Egypt, because there was a video that was released of a woman that was harassed on a campus in Cairo.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an organization there, HarassMap, that does the same thing, where they map incidents around Egypt. And so collaborating with people like them really helps, make the issue more in a global context for people. That, yeah, we experience it one way here, but then when you see this video of this woman on a campus being followed around by a mob of men, I mean, that's really scary. I mean, that wouldn't happen here, just the fact that, it's just so normalized in so many places, and sometimes it's much more severe, and, especially in other countries across the globe. And so we need to be able to support them by sharing their stories as well. And so I think that's, that's the thing. Those are the things that I learned by being involved in this work. And so it's my duty to, help educate the public and continue sharing those stories in different forums, with different groups. And so I would love to have men, contact me to volunteer, or talk to the women in their life about their experiences, or any of their friends about their experiences, whether they are, on a commute or on a college campus or at work. I think that it's time that, men really started talking about it and listening as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that's, that's a message not just for me, but for, I think, other men who are watching this Google Hangout, is that we have to listen and learn and absolutely support this movement, which is, how do we end street harassment? So these organizations don't even have to exist. So we don't even have to have an International Anti-Street Harassment Week. So we don't have to organize around this particular issue. I think it's really important for us to think about what is our role. Like, how are we responsible for these acts of violence and abuse towards women and girls? And I think that's so key. I have a friend and colleague who is writing a series of blog posts for Stop Sexual Harassment. His hashtag, his Twitter handle is @Joe SAMALIN, and he's been writing a series of blog posts. He just came out with a blog post called 29 Things Men Can Do to end sexual harassment, and I think it's an important read for every man who is listening, who wants to support women around these issues, who want to do something to end street harassment. And so I found it to be a really profound piece. I mean, there's 29 things we can do. So there's so much that men can do, and he's written some other pieces that you can find at that blog. But definitely follow him on Twitter and check out those blog posts. I think they've been really important for me to reflect on and to really think about. And he's encouraging men to do exactly a lot of the things that you just asked men to do, and to volunteer and to support your organization, to support you. Um, and I think that that's really key. So thank you for sharing that. So did you have any final questions for me, or do you want to just kind of jump into kind of sharing your contact information with folks so that, because it's really important for me. I don't want folks to contact me after, about this, because
Sure.
you're the one doing the work in Houston. You're the one doing the work in your community, and we just want to support these types of efforts around the state. But how can folks follow your work and start a Hollaback chapter in their community? What does it take? What do they need to consider before they reach out to Hollaback, or how can people make a donation to your organization or volunteer, or do you have any upcoming activities that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, well, if people in Houston want to get involved, um, there's an active Facebook page that I update regularly, and so people can like that page. I also have a specific Hollaback Houston website, and so that's houston.ihollaback.org, and that's where I post all the blog entries. So there's blog entries, and then there's also incidents that people submit through the website. There's also a mobile app that people can download. It's free, the Hollaback mobile app, and you can set it to your location. And if you're out on the street and something happens, you can submit a story right away, and that's how you Hollaback. And just to kind of touch on that, even though our organization is called Hollaback, it's not always about making a commitment to constantly confronting behaviors. And so we want people to know that not saying something is not doing anything. You did what was right for you in the situation. So what you can do after the fact is share your story. And that story not only helps you have support from Hollaback in our network, but that also helps other people that have been through those experiences. And maybe they've been harassed by that same person, because the stories get mapped on Houston. So there's a pin mark on a Google map for each incident. And so if we continue to collect data and stories are sounding really similar, we can then take that to, Crime Stoppers or whoever it may be, or, City of Houston, and contact them about specific areas that we need to maybe take a safety audit of. So that's really important. And so I would love if people would, in lieu of monetary donations, donate some stories, help us, show that people are experiencing this on a regular basis. Help give people strategies of maybe what you did in the moment, because that's the number one question we get is, what do I say? What do I do when this happens? And so when people can read about what others have done, whether they're, really witty remarks, and because in the moment, you walk away and maybe you didn't say anything, and then the great response comes to you, 5 minutes later, and you think, oh man, I wish I would have said this, or I'll say that next time. So we really do want people, to maybe start thinking about what their responses might be. And so in order to do that, it's great to have, someone who's been there say what they did in that situation. And so, so there's email contact info there, htown@ihollaback.org, if you want to email. Or if they have any questions outside of Houston, where they're curious how to start a chapter in their city, I can help with questions in that, or get them contact info for the directors to get into that process. So they basically, interview you on, what your goals will be for the organization, and then they put you in a class, so they schedule, the training with a group of people that want to launch a chapter all at the same time, because they have, live webinars that they take time for on different subjects about using social media, using the technology, organizing in the community, and ways to get people involved, and how to just, keep yourself organized, keep it all together, and so all the training is really fantastic. And there's a lot of really great support, not only within the organization of directors, but with the global community of activists. And so I really encourage people, if you have the time to do it, by all means, like, find yourself with a group of people that are there to support you and help you succeed, and help strengthen the message that we have to stop allowing street harassment to be normalized and accepted in our communities, because that just leads the way to more violence that happens behind closed doors. And there's also Twitter. So everything goes on Twitter as well. H-Town Hollaback, and so people can find us on Twitter as well.
Sweet. I think that you just laid out just the amazing array of ways that folks can get involved around these issues. I think that's so important. I think I'd love to see more men share this story, to write about this topic, to share their own experiences through the app. I think that's just a tremendous resource. And I encourage folks to explore this issue. Again, not just during this week, but I think throughout the month of April, during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and beyond. I think it's so important for us to continue to learn as much as we can about this issue and about what we can do in our own community. I would encourage folks to, in addition to liking Hollaback Houston on Facebook and Twitter, to please follow TAASA on Twitter at TAASA, and to like us on Facebook, and please share this particular Google Hangout with your friends and your followers, and over the next month. And we want to encourage as many people to just have these conversations with each other in their community, and to also think about organizing around this particular issue. And Hollaback is just one way to do that. And there's so much support, not just from me for the work that you're doing, but from folks all over the state and all over the country, and like you said, internationally, that support the work that you're doing. So you're not alone, and so that's really key. So, are there any final comments or questions that you wanted to pose, Hermie, before we end our time together?
Yes, I wanted to just give a big thank you to you and TAASA and all the fantastic friends, male and female, that have supported me thus far in this project through spreading the word about the organization, showing up at events, being available to participate in the events, and also connecting me with other organizations to partner with and talk to and find guidance from. So that's huge. And so I do really appreciate that. And I also want to say that I do have an ongoing project right now that people are welcome to view. Yesterday I had an event where I began a tour of some portraits that I have by an artist from New York City, Tatiana Fazlalizadeh, and her project is called Stop Telling Women to Smile. And I ordered a set of the 6 portraits that were designed to be wheat pastes. And I decided that when wheat pastes, if people aren't familiar, they're designed to be street art, so it's like sort of like an advertisement that you would post up, with wallpaper paste, it's kind of indestructible, and so it's a way of putting up artwork in a public space that is able to withstand the elements and very visible to people. And so rather than doing that, as I said, we have such a huge car culture in Houston. I wanted to catch people when they weren't driving, when they stop driving and they go shopping, or they go to a coffee shop or a bar and sit down and create these conversations, like, what is that? What does all this mean? And provide some context for people in that way. So I have the prints display, the really large 18 by 24 posters. And so I'm going to approach different businesses around town to host the prints for a month, and also provide some information about Hollaback and about street harassment, and ways people can get involved and and be a better bystander. And so currently the prints are up at a shop in the Rice Village in Houston at a place called Myth and Symbol, and they'll be up there until the end of April, and then they'll move to the next location, and I'll have that up on the website, the Houston website, and also on Facebook as well, for people to follow the project. So if they miss it at that location, they can check it out at the next one, and just so that way people can continue thinking about this issue and continue thinking about the project, or remind themselves to look up Tatiana and her progress on her project. And so I really I'm trying to help promote what she's doing, because I think it's sending a really powerful message to people, and so I would love for more people to see it, because not only are the portraits beautiful, but they're really powerful. And so I think it's really important for people to be able to see it and see that their favorite places support this message as well. And so I think that will send a really powerful statement to people in a general sort of social setting, away from their normal routines.
It's a very exciting project, and I wanted to mention with you, I was on this particular poster, and artists were highlighted on Upworthy today, and so
yes,
that's that's a wonderful way for folks to learn about this project, and encourage folks to share that on social media. There it is, yeah. So so there's so many wonderful ways that you're organizing and doing the work in Houston that folks can absolutely learn from. So I encourage folks to reach out to Hermie and Hollaback Houston about the work that they're doing, and I appreciate your willingness to help folks organize their own communities, and I think that's important. I want to encourage men to reach out and to show support, and to join women in their own community to organize around this particular issue, and you're doing it in so many wonderful and creative ways, and I appreciate your time this afternoon, and I look forward to continuing these conversations with you. Again, not just this week, but throughout the year, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to explore these issues and to really address some of this, to not just address this particular issue, but to really think about the way that you're organizing folks in your in your community. There's a lot that our rape crisis centers around the state can learn from you, and the folks that you're organizing with. So, again, thank you so much for joining us, and please share this with folks on social media. And Hermie, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and appreciate your time.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.